and welcome to stage 1 of the Idlewild Dress Crochet Along. I'm Jess from Make and Do Crew, and I'm so glad you're joining us on this Choose Your Own Adventure dressmaking extravaganza. Today we're going to cover why a gauge swatch is important, how to crochet the front bodice section of your dress, and discuss how to adjust the torso length if you'd like. If you find yourself needing any additional help, or you just want to show off your stitches, I would love it if you joined us in the Make and Do Crew Facebook group, which I've linked below. And speaking of showing off your stitches, I definitely want to watch your dress come together, so make sure to tag me at Make and Do Crew and use the hashtag IdlewildDress on Instagram so we can all see what you're up to. So let's talk about what supplies we need to make our dresses. This is Lion Brand's Beautiful You yarn, and it's a category 2 yarn. And what I really like about it is that it's super drapey and it wears beautifully for a garment, but it's also machine washable and dryable, so it's easy to take care of, especially if you're making a kid dress. This is a yarn that I think worked really beautifully in the samples, and I'm gonna just link this and then all the other supplies we need right below the video in case you need some sourcing recommendations. So we've got this, the amount that you need is listed in the written pattern, which we're gonna cover in a second. You're also gonna need a size G, which is, this one is a 4.25 millimeter hook, or whatever hook you need to achieve the gauge in the pattern. So in a few minutes, we're gonna talk about making a gauge swatch and adjusting your hook if you need to, but the pattern calls for this G hook. If you need to size up or down a size or even a couple sizes, that's totally fine. The most important thing is that you're getting the gauge that's listed in the written pattern. You're also going to need some stitch markers and a tapestry needle to weave in your ends. And this is called an upholstery needle because it's got an extra sharp point. That's what I like to use just because it cuts through any crocheted fabric, but a regular tapestry needle works just fine too. And then lastly, we're gonna wanna have some T-pins for blocking. So these look like this. You can also use like a straight sewing pin as long as it's rust proof, as well as a steamer or an iron. So this is my steamer. I'll link it below. It works really well for blocking things. You don't worry about accidentally touching an iron to your yarn, which you wouldn't wanna do. But if you don't have a steamer, you can also just use an iron that has a steam setting. So we'll talk about that more in the 4th video where we put all the finishing touches on our project. Over the next 4 videos, I'm going to be showing you each step of how to crochet this dress from start to finish, but you're also going to want to follow along with the free written pattern, which you can find on my blog, which is makeanddocrew.com. I'll also link it right below this video. But the reason you're going to need that is because we're covering sizes 2 through 16 in girls and then sizes small through 5X in women, there's going to obviously be a lot of variation in the number of stitches and rows that you need to work for your size. So I will teach you each technique, and then you can reference the free written pattern to know exactly how many stitches or rows you need to work to make your size. And if you're crocheting along with us live in the crochet along, you're going to be able to find the next stage of the free written pattern each Friday morning over the next 4 weeks. So that's always going to be on makeanddocrew.com. And if you're catching up later after the fact, you can find all of those still on makeanddocrew.com and then crochet at your own pace. Speaking of working at your own pace, if you'd like to work faster than the free pattern is released, or you just plan on doing a lot of couch crocheting, which is my favorite, I highly recommend upgrading to the pattern PDF, and that's linked right below this video. That includes the entire written pattern right up front, so you don't have to wait for each stage to be released, but even more importantly, it's formatted for super easy printing, so it's beautiful, it's got nice big type, and you don't have to look at it on your computer while you crochet. If you do want to use like a tablet or maybe look at it on your phone, it's also formatted really well for looking at on mobile. So that's easier than viewing the blog, and it doesn't have any ads. So that's an option. I've also put a lot of extra bonuses in there because I want to make sure you can feel really successful with this pattern. So it includes stitch charts for the top of the dress, as well as the sleeves if you're making the women's sizes, and the skirt section. So if you're a visual learner, which I'm assuming you are because you're watching this video, I think stitch charts are just invaluable for understanding crochet pattern lingo in a quick visual way. So again, that's linked right below. You can pick it up at any time, and there's the option to buy the women's and children's pattern together and save a little money, or you can buy just the women's pattern or just the children's pattern. All right, now we're going to dive into learning the steps of crocheting the bodice front. And the very first step is probably the most important in the entire pattern. Can you guess what it is? We are going to crochet a gauge swatch. And the reason that that is important is that we want to make sure that the tension that you're crocheting with is the same tension that the pattern is written in, because that's going to mean that the measurements of the dress size that you're intending to make are also the measurements that you end up with. So essentially, we're going to make sure that your dress is going to fit when you finally put it on heroically at the end of this crochet along. So to do your gauge swatch, you are going to work a swatch of the bodice pattern. So in a few minutes, we're going to dive into exactly how to work the bodice, but please look at the written pattern first and notice that sort of toward the top of it, right below the supplies, there's a section that says how to crochet the gauge swatch. So instead of beginning with the total number of stitches that you need to make your bodice front, please start with 27 stitches if you're doing a foundation double crochet, or if you want to start with chains and then double crochet into them, which we're going to talk about in a minute, then you need to start with 29 chains. But you need to make that small swatch because when you measure that, you're going to want to see how many stitches do you have in 4 inches like this horizontally, and then how many rows do you have in 4 inches vertically. And if you're having more stitches and more rows than the gauge of the pattern, then you're going to want to increase your hook size. Use a hook size that is larger than what's listed in the pattern. If you're finding though that you don't quite have enough stitches in there, or you don't quite have enough rows, then you're going to want to decrease your hook size. So the hook size is sort of arbitrary. You can use any hook it takes to achieve that gauge that's listed in the pattern. Please take away from this that as we move into the bodice steps, you're going to want to make the small swatch size version first, which is written out in the pattern, using all the same skills we're about to cover. And then you'll be both a pro at the stitch and guarantee that your dress is going to fit when you're finished. And this bodice is really easy to modify. So the first thing we're going to do is work these rows that go from the bottom of the bodice to the armhole inset. And if you decide that you want either a dress that has a longer bodice before you get to the lace section, or a peplum style top like this that is longer and then just has a bit of lace at the bottom, or maybe even a much longer tunic that just finishes with a little bit of lace, this is where you would make that decision. So the pattern is going to describe how to create this look. So the bodice ends like slightly below your bra if you're a woman, a little bit higher than your natural waist. But if you want to extend it, all you need to do is work extra rows of the main bodice repeat here. So this has just had a few more inches added so that it hits my cute little daughter there a little bit past her belly button, and then the lace sort of extends on to like where a belt would be. So when you make that decision, you can just continue in repeats. This is also described in the pattern, but you can just continue in extra repeats until you have the length that you like if you want to modify it. And then you can just measure it against your body, putting this in where the armhole would begin, up against your armpit, and then seeing if you like this length right here where it's hanging down on your front, because this length won't be able to be modified as far as in this stitch pattern goes once you begin the armhole inset and working the neckline. So when you look at the written pattern, you're going to see that there are 2 options for how to work your foundation row, and it really doesn't matter which one you choose, so please just choose the one that you feel the most comfortable with. If you're interested in learning the foundation double crochet, that's what I'm going to show you here, but it can honestly be a little finicky. It took me a while to figure it out, so if you're not getting it from this video, go ahead and YouTube it. I know there's a lot of great tutorials on it, and that's how I learned. But if that's feeling frustrating to you, just follow the instructions for the alternative method, which is simply creating a long chain and then double crocheting into the 4th chain from the hook and just double crocheting across. That is a totally fine option as well. To work a foundation double crochet, essentially what we're doing is working the chain row and the double crochet row at the same time. So you skip that tedious step of working into each chain with a double crochet because you're kind of packaging them all as one, and then this counts as the first row of your project. So to begin, we need to chain 3, and that's the only time we're going to chain 3. That's just how we begin it. And then we're going to yarn over and insert our hook in the very first chain that we made. And from here, we're going to repeat the same steps over and over for each stitch. So I've inserted my hook. Now I'm going to yarn over, just like I would start a double crochet, and pull my hook through that first stitch. From here, I need to chain 1, because this is the bottom of the row and we're creating that chain that we talked about. So that counts as my chain. And now I'm going to yarn over and pull through 2, and yarn over and pull through 2. So that, if you think about what we just did there, we created a chain and then we did a double crochet. So like I was saying, we're creating at the same time the chain row and the double crochet row, the first row, so you don't have to do them separately. So from here, I'm going to yarn over and insert my hook now in the chain stitch. So this is where it gets a little bit hard to see. It's essentially the closest thing to the hook that is not the double crochet. This takes a little bit of practice of just sticking it in spots and then realizing what parts of the strands of yarn you're looking for. I like to work under both of the loops of that chain. So we've got both loops there in that last chain, and now I'm going to yarn over. I've pulled it through, I have 3 loops on my hook. Now we're going to create our chain. So that's our chain, and now we're going to create our double crochet. So I just yarn over and pull through 2, yarn over and pull through 2. Let's try it again. I'm going to yarn over, and if you see here, this is my double crochet. So I'm working into where my left thumb is here, because that's my chain. So I'm going to work under both strands of that. Inserted my hook. I'm going to yarn over and pull through. I have 3 loops now. Now it's time to do my chain. So I'm going to pull through, that's my chain, and now I can complete the double crochet by pulling through 2 and pulling through 2. Let's do that one more time. I'm yarning over and I'm inserting my hook. I'm skipping this double crochet section so that I can work into the chain. Now that I've got my hook under there, I can yarn over and pull through to get my yarn ready. And now I'm going to chain 1. And then I'm going to pull through the next 2 and then the next 2. So when I'm counting these, I have the chain 3 that counts as my first double crochet, and then you can kind of just look at the top of them like you would with regular double crochet. So we've got our chain 3 here, which is 1, and then I've got 2, 3, 4, and 5. And then once you get to the end of that row of foundation double crochets or regular double crochets, just double check your stitch count to make sure you have the right number, because that's really going to impact the pattern on row 2. So for row 2, we are going to chain 1, and this row is worked entirely with single and double crochets. It's really a pretty simple pattern. So when we chain 1, then we're going to single crochet in the first stitch, and then we're going to double crochet in that same stitch. So we've got this little sort of small cluster completed, and then we're going to skip the next stitch. And so in the third stitch, we're going to do another single crochet and a double crochet in the same stitch. So there's my single, and now there's my double. And that's all there is to this entire row. So I'm going to skip the next stitch and then do a single and a double in the next stitch. So what we're going to do all the way across is skip a stitch and then single and double in the next stitch, and then skip a stitch and then single and double in the next stitch. And now as we come upon the end of this row 2, we're going to have 1 stitch left to skip and then 1 stitch left to work into. And it looks kind of weird here because this was foundation double crochet. It's a little hard to see, but it would, if you did double crochet in this row instead of foundation double crochet, it will look like it's the turning chain. So we're going to work 1 final single crochet into that. I've done 1 last single double here, and then I'm skipping a stitch, and then I'm going to finish the row with a single crochet. And those are the 2 basic rows that you need to complete the entire next bodice section. So I'll just show you how this looks from here. We're going to chain 3 because this is going to be a double crochet row. We're going to just alternate double crochet rows with these single double rows. So for the double crochet row, we are going to skip the first stitch because this chain 3 is counting as the first stitch. So we'll skip the first stitch right here and instead work into the second stitch from the hook. So that is right here. If you're looking at it from the other direction, that would be the last double crochet that you did. So I'm going to double crochet in there. And then it's as simple as just double crocheting across this entire row, ending with my last stitch, which should be that very first single crochet that we worked over here. And here we are at the end of the row, so we're going to work 2 last stitches in the final double crochet and single crochet from the beginning of last row. So that first one is the double crochet right there, and then I'm going to put a double crochet in this very last stitch. It's the last little V at the end of your row. So there's my last double crochet here, and to proceed I would do another row 2, which is a single crochet and a double crochet in the first stitch. So I've chained 1, I'm going to single crochet there, double crochet in the same spot, and then skip a stitch, and then single and double in the next stitch. So then we're just going to alternate rows of double crochet and then that single crochet double crochet row. It's a row 2. We're going to alternate those back and forth until we get to the point where we're going to indent for the armholes. Now once we've completed the correct number of repeats for our size, we should be ending with a row 2. So every size ends with a row 2, and now it's time to eliminate some stitches on either side of the piece to form what's going to be the armhole. So I'm going to chain 1 and turn my work here, and the number of stitches that you're eliminating is based on the size you're making. So check out the written pattern for that, but the way it's going to work is we're going to insert our hook in the first stitch, pull the yarn up, and then pull through the loop on the hook, and that makes the slip stitch. So I'm going to do 3 right here. So there's 2 and then 3. And now I'm done doing my indent. So I'm going to chain 3, and that is going to count as the same stitch that was my last slip stitch. So all that matters about that is that you're going to start your next double crochet in the next stitch. So I'm inserting my hook here and completing the entire double crochet there, and then I can place a stitch marker. This is pretty obvious to see, but for the sake of the written pattern, we're going to place a stitch marker in the top of that chain 3. So from now on, our rows are going to be worked between these 2 stitch markers we're placing right now. So I'm going to work double crochets all the way across here until I get to the other side, and I'm going to stop 2 short of the end of the row. So again, check out the written pattern to know how many you should leave unworked down here, but I'm going to work those double crochets and then I'll meet you right here. And now I've come upon the end of my row, so for me I'm leaving 2 stitches unworked here, and I'm going to place this marker in the last stitch that I work. So now we know all the stitches are going to fall between these 2 markers. If that's really obvious to you, feel free to take the markers out now. But we're going to work some repeats in the same pattern for a few more rows, the number again based on the size that you're making, and then we're either, if you're making the front, we're going to divide for the front to create the neckline, and if you're making the back, we're going to keep going a little bit more and then again divide to create a slight slope in the back of the neck. So from here we can just continue in the same pattern we've been working. So I'm going to continue with a row 2, and all sizes are going to start this part with a row 2. So I'm just going to chain 1 and then do the single crochet. This is a bit in my way. Do a single crochet and a double crochet, and then do that same thing all the way across until I get to the second marker. So go ahead and repeat those rows for the correct number for your size, and then we'll come back and talk about dividing for the front. All right, once you've completed the correct number of repeats after the armhole, we're ready to move on to dividing for the front. And this is the point at which, if you were working the back, you would do some more rows like this. So we'll talk about that in the back video. But for right now, we're going to keep our yarn attached and work a section right here, and then work just back and forth in that section. And then we'll cut our yarn and then reattach on the other side and work back and forth over here. So again, we should be ending with a row 2, You can see I didn't have to do very many repeats because I'm working a child size, but if you're doing an adult dress, this section is obviously going to be much taller. I'm going to begin with just a normal double crochet row, just as we've been working, so I'm skipping that first stitch and then working into the second stitch, and I'm going to work across for the number of stitches for my size. So again, you'll want to look at the pattern to know what that is for you, but I'm going to do those here, and then I'll show you how we do a decrease at the end of this row. All right, so in the pattern, it's going to tell you to chain 3 and then work X number of double crochets. So when you're counting those, you're going to have X number of double crochets plus 1 because of the chain 3. So I was supposed to work 16 double crochets here, and when I count, I have 17 because I'm counting that chain 3 as my first stitch. So now it's time to do a double crochet 2 together, and what that's going to do is eliminate 1 stitch here and start to form a slope this direction for the neckline. So to do a double crochet 2 together, I just yarn over like I'm doing a normal double crochet, insert my hook, and then yarn over again and pull through 2 of the loops. So now I have 2 loops on my hook, and then I'm going to now work into the next stitch over without getting rid of either of these. So I'm going to yarn over like I'm doing a double crochet again, insert my hook, yarn over again, and now I have 4 loops on my hook. So I'm going to yarn over and pull through the first 2. So essentially what we've done is 2 half parts of a double crochet, and now I'm going to yarn over and pull through all 3 loops on my hook. So we're ending up with 1 stitch here where there was 2. And now we're ready to turn this row. So from now on, we're only going to be working in this small section. So to complete a row 2 with a decrease, we're going to start by doing a single crochet 2 together in the first 2 stitches. So that is also pretty simple. We're going to chain 1, insert our hook in the first stitch, pull through, but instead of yarning over and finishing that single crochet, we're going to insert our hook in the second stitch, yarn over and pull through. So now we have 3 loops on there, and then we're going to yarn over and pull through all 3. So again, we've eliminated 1 stitch right here where there were 2, and this is counting as our first single crochet. So if you remember in the pattern, in the first single crochet, then we put a double crochet in the same stitch. So we're going to work our double crochet into this second stitch where we completed the decrease. So I'm just going to insert my hook again there, finish my double crochet, and then I can work in the pattern for the rest of the row over to this edge. And I find that it's kind of hard because of this slant to know where my last stitch was here. So I found it helpful when I've been working these to put a stitch marker in the top of my first single crochet. So that's a single crochet 2 together, and that just shows me that that's the end of the row when I'm working back this way, and I don't need to go down this slope and start looking for stitches. So I'm going to continue this pattern, skip the next stitch, and then do a single and double crochet in the same stitch together, and then we're going to continue just like this in the same pattern for a certain number of rows depending on your size. So you'll always decrease at the edge with the marker. Just to clarify here, once I've completed my row 2 back this direction that had a decrease over here, and I'm working back in double crochet, I'm gonna stop here when there's 2 stitches left so I can work my double crochet 2 together. And so that's gonna include the marked stitch and then the stitch before it. And that's why I put the marker there, because sometimes it's hard to spot that stitch and it's hard to know where to stop. So I'm going to just put my hook in there and complete this double crochet 2 together like this, and now I'm gonna flip it around, work that single crochet 2 together in the first 2 stitches, and then when that is done, I put my stitch marker in it and I just keep repeating that. So depending on the size that you're making, you're going to repeat those rows for a while, and it may be, depending on your size, that then the pattern asks you to crochet a couple rows at the very top with no increasing or decreasing on them. So that's just gonna extend your top as long as it needs to be for your body, and you're not gonna do these decreases at the beginning and end of the row. You're just gonna work kind of like we did in these rows. It's just gonna be really short, nice fast rows. And then we'll meet back here and talk about how to work the mirror image of this on this opposite side. All right, now that the first side is complete, you can fasten off your yarn and leave sort of a long tail because we'll use that for seaming up here at the top. And then we're gonna reattach our yarn over here to work the second front. So in the pattern, it's gonna tell you to count a certain number of stitches from this side, and then you can put a marker there so you don't lose it, or just attach your yarn. So you're counting from over here to here, and then this marked stitch here is where I'm gonna attach my yarn. And once your yarn is attached there, it's important to just make sure that the right side of the fabric is facing you. So that's the side that looks more textured. You can kind of see these little rows bumping out. The other side just looks a little more flat. So this is the side that'll be showing out on your dress. And I have my yarn attached here. So we're gonna do the opposite of what we did over here. So previously we were always decreasing at the end of a regular double crochet row, but now we're gonna decrease at the beginning of it. And to do that, instead of chaining 3, we're just going to chain 2, and then in the next stitch we're going to double crochet. Normally we would skip that next stitch, but we're going to double crochet in it, and then this is counting as our decrease. So this is our first decrease here, and then we're going to double crochet in each stitch across the row to this armhole. Once again, it can be pretty helpful to just put a stitch marker in the top of that decrease so that you know where the row ends. So I'm going to put it right there. That's where our double crochet 2 together was. And at the end of this row, now we're going to work a regular single crochet double crochet row in the other direction until we have 2 stitches left. So it's the same way we've done it all along, with a single crochet and a double crochet in the first stitch, and then skipping the next stitch and repeating that across. And then once you come to the end of that row, there should actually be 3 stitches remaining, because there's the one that you would typically skip, and then there's 2 more. So those are the last 2 stitches where we need to do our decrease. And that's going to end, instead of with 1 single crochet, it's going to end with a single crochet 2 together. So I'm going to insert my hook, I'm going to skip 1 and insert my hook in the second stitch, yarn over, and then insert my hook in the last stitch here, the marked one, yarn over, and then pull through all 3 loops. So that is our decrease for this row. And now we're going to work back in the other direction with that chain 2 like we did before. The only difference now for this row and the subsequent rows is that instead of working in the next stitch like we did in our very first row, we're actually going to work in the stitch, we're going to skip 1 and then work in the next stitch. So this is our chain 2 that's going to count as our decrease, and then I'm going to skip a stitch like we normally do and work a double crochet here. And so, this stitch now is a decrease, and this counts as my first stitch of this row, and I can look at it when I'm coming back the opposite way. So here we're just going to double crochet across and then work that same decrease row of single crochet, double crochet that we did before. So we're, just like we did on the other side, going to alternate those 2 rows. And then if you have any of the rows that you need to do that are not increasing or decreasing, they're just straight up back and forth, then you'll do those. And what you should end up with is a piece that looks identical on the right side and the left side. Now that you've gotten the hang of the bodice front, next week the bodice back is going to be a piece of cake. Next week, we're also going to learn how to do the minimal seaming necessary to join the front and back together so they're ready for a skirt. Thanks so much for joining us in the Idlewild Crochet Along. Until next week, happy crocheting!